Hi everyone and welcome to Unit 4. This is going to be a very short video. It's just a voiceover to make the PowerPoint intro to that unit easier to understand. So I'm not going to add much to what's in the PowerPoint, but I'm just going to talk over the slides so that you have a good intro into the task for the week. So this week we're having a little break from the issue of research design and the methods to look at the language of academic work. And ask yourself some fundamental questions about what makes it unique and how to navigate the language, and also how to produce work that reflects that etiquette and those conventions. Which doesn't mean that you should stop the work that you've all begun, which is to reflect on the question that you might be interested in moving forward, right? Because we'll come back to that, and eventually you have to get there in Unit 6. But in terms of content, at least we're pausing that in our collective discussions, and we're talking about something else for this unit. So the objectives for this unit is to look at the nature, format, and tone of reliable academic source, to explore the various voices that appear in academic writing, and to explore the way research distinguishes itself from other academic writing in terms of language and tone. Particularly, we're going to look at how do we make a difference between something that we might reference in a paper and something that we might read but not reference in a paper, right? So the sort of distinctions. So the first thread that you will have on the virtual forum asks you to really try and define what is a reliable source in terms of academic research. In the past, it was really easy because when you ask people what a reliable source was, it was basically a double peer-reviewed international journal, right? So that was what it was. But the world has changed. The world of publishing has changed, and media and the internet has also changed people's access to research. And so it's no longer just as easy as that. So that's the first thread. I'm asking you just to put all your thoughts as to, in that complex landscape, how are you going to determine what is a credible and reliable source for an academic paper? The second part is still going to go on about what is reliable academic source, but here we are going to look at I'm going to give you some examples of various voices within what could be reliable sources. So I'm not giving the answer to the first thread, but I'm giving you some illustrations as to what normally we can encounter now, just so you have some context here. So the first one is an educational journal. So I'm asking you, what are the main features of this kind of writing? It's a random abstract from a random study, but the point is not the content, the point is really the format. So looking at the paragraph, looking at the style, looking at it's written, try and really be as analytical as you can in terms of saying what is characteristic in a short extract like this about academic writing. And you will have a thread for that. It's not just journal articles in education, though, and we do use also journal articles from other fields. And there it starts getting a bit more complex because it may not have that same feel. So here I've given you another abstract from a text which is out of date, but it really doesn't matter because it's not about content, it's about format. Some things will strike you right away as being different from the last abstract. So we have to appreciate the fact that we cannot restrict this notion of credible source to just what we're used to seeing in education, because at times we may be drawn to use academic writing from other disciplines, and that might not look the same. That may not have the same sort of etiquettes and expectations. So that's your second thread. You'll tell me what's different about this one, what you notice being different. And keeping in mind that this is still an academic source, right? But it's different from the first one. So you're developing your sensitivity to the variety of sources that you may actually encounter. Now, we increasingly use in research and in citations things that are very much linked to the profession and often do relate to research, but that may not be produced in academic journals. So now the matrix becomes even more complex to define, because these are typically things that we can also reference, print and web-based material that is emerging from the profession itself. So it could be at national level, a provincial level, regional, a school board, newsletters, etc. And it can be in the press. So here I've given you an article from the Guardian Education, which is considered something that is read widely by researchers and academics in the field, and something that may be referenced easily because it's a press article that talks about research, right? So it is something that we would still want to reference. So again, look at how you would recognize this sort of academic writing, what's the sort of etiquette in terms of level of language, format of writing, style of prose, and see how it is different from what you encountered before. Again, you're developing your sensitivity to the great diversity and variety of tones that you now have to include into this matrix of reliable sources. And also, just to go back to the last, keep in mind that this one is from the Guardian Educational. Just try and think and differentiate to what would make it an article that would be okay to source in an educational paper, and what would be press that you can't cite in an educational paper. So how is this article different from other press that you encounter, right? That's what you've got to ask yourself as well. And then finally, again, as I've said, because of the web, because of the explosion of internet, because of the enormous revolution that's occurred in how we disseminate information generally, and how we've got rid of gatekeepers such as publishers, editors, formal newspapers, etc. A lot of that information now has been democratized and now is accessible to you freely in open access on the web. So this has led to the creation of academic videos, academic blogs, academic podcasts, academic websites. And again, here the tone will be, and I've started talking about this when I asked you to do a blog for assignment 1, and we talked about what it would look like. It is still academic material. It is still something that you would definitely cite in a paper, but it's not your average social media, right? Something differentiate this from the rest. So what's the major difference between a blog and a journal publication, but also what is the major difference between the blog that is professional and in the field of education compared to other blogs and other social media that you encounter. This is an extract from Katie Novak. She's a colleague, an American colleague who does a lot of work in UDL, and she's fairly prolific. That's why I chose this one. She blogs regularly, etc., and she's cited fairly widely. So to put this in practice, because otherwise it would remain really conceptual, and you could go through this unit and say, yes, I understand. Phoebe is talking to me about, different levels of language, different formats, and I have to, widen my understanding of what credible source is. But I want you to refine this through examples. So then you will have 4 threads, you have 4 vignettes, and as a class, you're going to have to tell me what you think this is. It is an academic source, it is a reliable source, but it comes from a variety of environments. So you're going to have to tell me what you think it's extracted from without being told. So you're going to have to tell me, do you think this is a journal article in the field of education? This is a journal article in another discipline. This is a press item, or this is a blog, for example, that is just found on the web. So you have 4, you have 4 vignettes. I'm not going to give you any more information about this, but immerse yourself in the tone, immerse yourself in what's being said, and then try and justify when you're in the vignette, right? Don't just say, I think it's a blog, but try to tell me why you think it's a blog and what in the language itself, the level of language, the formulation, the presentation, the style, the relationship with the reader. Tell me what you think it is. Is it a, academic, journal article in education, a journal article in a non-education publication, a website, a blog, or you could also tell me this looks like writing that is probably journalistic, etc., but not in the field of education, and not something that I would necessarily cite in a paper. So you could also make that decision. Say this isn't a credible source, and Fove's led a trap for us here, and I wouldn't cite this. So it's kind of amusing, playful activity, and hopefully it's going to make you conscious of the complexity of the job that we now have as readers and consumers of research in determining with precision how we define what credible sources are, and how we cite them. And you have 2, and you have 3, and then you have 4. Okay, so have fun with this, and we will talk about it in the Collaborate session, and we'll wrap up on this. I'm probably not going to add that much. I will probably wrap up on the Collaborate session. So after that, you will still be obviously allowed to contribute, but the activity will probably have come to an end because it's not huge in content this session. And then you'll probably take the rest of the unit to continue working on finding questions and designing your question. Okay, see you soon. Have a good beginning of the weekend.